Welcome, everyone. Today we're looking at something really unique. It's a single, very detailed story shared by one of you, a listener. It's all about their experiences living in one specific condominium building in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. A pretty chilling personal account.
That's right. So instead of our usual approach, today we're really just focusing on this one narrative. We'll walk through what this person experienced, the unexplained things that happened in this one place. We want to understand the story as they told it, look closely at the events, and see what it tells us, especially about the location itself.
Okay, let's get into it. This story is, wow. The person who shared it, we'll call him Mr. Thanet, as the source does. He's a Thai government official. And back in 2016, he got posted to Kuala Lumpur.
Right, so he needed a place to stay. He ended up renting a pretty big apartment, a 3-bedroom unit in this condo. Apparently, he just took over the lease from the person he was replacing at his job. Simple as that.
And crucially, he had absolutely no idea, zero inkling that anything was off about this place when he moved in. The source says he was there for about 3 months, totally normal, just settling in. But then the first strange thing happened.
Yeah, and this first one sounds like textbook sleep paralysis. He described being totally awake, aware of his room, but completely unable to move. Couldn't lift a finger, couldn't turn his head, just stuck.
And while he's lying there, helpless, he sees something. A figure kneeling right next to his bed, staring at him. The curtains were open, so there was moonlight, enough light to see this figure pretty clearly.
And what's really striking here, a key detail from the source, is how specific his description was. It wasn't just like a shadow. He clearly identified her as an Indian woman. He mentioned the red dot on her forehead, the Bindian clothes that looked like a sari or maybe a head covering, and her expression. The source says it was pure anger. Just staring intensely.
That detail. Wow. Imagine being paralyzed and there's this clearly identifiable figure just radiating anger at you in the dark. He was terrified, obviously, trying with all his might to move, to break free, but nothing. So he just started praying, mentally reciting every prayer he knew, just hoping something would work.
The source estimates this went on for about 10 minutes, which must have felt like an eternity. Then slowly the figure stood up. It seemed to drift towards the bathroom area and then vanished. Gone.
And the second she disappeared, he could move again. The paralysis just lifted. He immediately jumped out of bed, flicked on every single light in the apartment, and grabbed an amulet he had to wear. He checked the time, it was around 2 a.m.
And the source adds that the very next day he went to his office and brought back a specific amulet, the Luang Pu Thwat. It's a highly revered amulet in Thai tradition, known for protection. He put it right by his headboard. And interestingly, the source does note that after he did that, he didn't really have encounters with that specific Indian woman again. It seemed to work, for her at least.
Okay, so maybe some peace. One entity dealt with.
Well, not quite. As the source makes very clear, that was really just the beginning. Things actually escalated. New presences started showing up.
Right. The story picks up with Mr. Thanet talking to his driver in Malaysia one day.
Yeah, the driver just asks him point blank, "Are you okay living in that condo?"
Which, immediately made Mr. Thanet think. He was hesitant at first to share the weird stuff happening, but the driver sort of hinted pretty strongly that people knew something about that building.
So Mr. Thanet asks him, "Do you know anything about the history, the reputation?"
And the driver basically confirms, yeah, there's something known about the place, and he promises to tell him the details later.
That's a big moment, right? It suggests Mr. Thanet's experiences aren't just random. They might be tied to the building's past.
Exactly. It shifts the focus.
Yeah.
So while he's waiting to hear this backstory, the weirdness continues. And it changes. The source talks about a second type of encounter, a totally different spirit.
Right. He's watching TV one night, late, and hears a door open somewhere in the apartment. His first thought, totally normal, maybe it's his mother. She was living there with him too.
But that thought vanished instantly. He felt this intense cold wash over him, hair standing on end, that gut feeling, this isn't normal. And then he sees her, a different spirit. This one he described as a plump woman with curly hair. And she was silent, no sound at all.
And the chilling part is what she did. She didn't just appear. The source says she walked calmly past him, past the TV, walked into his bedroom, and just lay down.
Yeah.
On his bed, the bed where he normally slept.
Laid down on his bed. Can you imagine your personal space just invaded like that, silently? He was totally freaked out, completely shocked. And get this, that Luang Pu Thwat amulet, it was right there by the headboard. But this new spirit didn't seem bothered by it at all, completely undeterred.
Yeah, that's significant. The protection wasn't universal, it seems. He was so disturbed by this, seeing her on his bed, that he couldn't sleep in his own room for almost 3 weeks afterwards. Avoided it completely.
I don't blame him one bit. But eventually you have to try, right? So after that long break, he decides to sleep in his room again. Late one night, maybe 11 p.m.
And guess who shows up again?
Oh no, the same one.
The same one, the plump, curly-haired woman. But this time it was much worse.
Yeah.
Far more invasive, more terrifying.
How so? What happened?
She didn't just lie on the bed this time. The source says she sat on the headboard, directly above his head as he was lying there. Her legs were basically resting on his shoulder area. And then she started to lean down toward that, like she was going to hug him or embrace him.
Oh, that's horrifying. That feeling of being trapped, something physically pressing down on you from above. He said he felt this extreme fear wash over him. He shut his eyes tight, just started praying again, mentally, desperately, and he specifically noted she was sitting right beside the Luang Puthuat amulet, and it had zero effect, absolutely none. She didn't seem to care it was there at all.
And just when you think it can't get any worse, it does. As this first spirit is leaning down towards him, a second spirit appears. This one materializes at the foot of the bed.
A second one, at the same time.
Yes, and this second entity immediately grabbed his arms. One spirit for each arm, pinning him down, holding him completely still.
My God. So he's trapped. One spirit looming over him, leaning in, and another physically restraining his arms from below. He described feeling intense pain, like he was being stabbed. A physical attack. He struggled, tried to fight back, but he couldn't break free. All he could do was keep praying in his head until finally he sort of regained some composure, and then they just vanished, both of them.
The aftermath must have been awful. The source says he was physically exhausted, just gasping for breath. He immediately went to his prayer room and just stayed there praying for hours, trying to calm down, trying to process that level of terror. He described that specific event, being held down and attacked by two spirits, as the absolute most terrifying thing he experienced there.
I can only imagine, but the activity wasn't just visual or physical like that. There were auditory things too, right?
Absolutely. One night, same pattern. Hears a door open. He calls out, thinking it's his mother. But instead of her voice, he hears this small female voice say one word in Thai. Don't. Or, Gin.
Whoa, speaking in his language, that's specific.
Isn't it?
Creepy.
Very. And then the plump, curly-haired spirit walks in, repeating that same word, don't, as she walked. She came right up to his side, lay down next to him on the bed again, turned her head, and just softly laughed right in his ear. The source even notes the sounds. Ha ha ha.
Just laughing in his ear. What did he do?
He said he was just frozen. Couldn't move, couldn't speak. All he could do was mentally recite metta, those loving kindness chants. And he reflected in the source kind of chillingly that he felt like he was almost getting used to it. Not that it wasn't terrifying, but just hoping that making merit for them might eventually help.
Making merit, like transferring good karma?
Exactly. A common Buddhist practice to help spirits or appease them. So he's lying there, reciting metta. This thing is laughing in his ear. And then, just like that, she disappears again.
Unbelievable. And it wasn't just him, right? His mother saw things too.
Oh, yes. His poor mother had her own horrifying experience. The source details what she saw, and it sounds like pure nightmare fuel. She described seeing a small child spirit, white face, sitting right on her chest, smiling this huge, terrifying grin. She actually compared it to something from a horror movie, like Ju-on.
Sitting on her chest. Ugh.
And that wasn't all. At the same time, in the corner near her feet, she saw another spirit, a huge one. So tall, its head was touching the ceiling, just standing there looking down at her.
So they're both having these awful experiences, different spirits, different types of encounters. I mean, the conversations they must have had, we have to get out of here.
They absolutely did talk about leaving, constantly living in fear like that. Who wouldn't want to? But here's the really frustrating part, the practical constraint they faced, according to the source. Despite the terror, the lease wasn't up, and the landlord, well, let's just say my apartment is haunted by multiple terrifying spirits, isn't usually considered a valid reason to break a lease without penalty.
Right. You'd lose your deposit, probably face fines.
Exactly. They calculated they'd lose a significant amount of money. So they felt trapped. They basically decided they had to just endure it until the lease ended to avoid that financial hit.
What a terrible choice to have to make. Live in terror or face serious financial loss. He apparently talked about it a lot at work, shared these stories with colleagues.
Which is understandable. You need to talk about it, try to make sense of it, maybe get some support. and the word got around. The source mentions that a senior colleague from his ministry actually heard about his situation during a work trip to Malaysia.
And this colleague tried to help, right? Brought something.
Yes, very thoughtfully. He specifically brought a sacred amulet from Thailand for Mr. Thanet, a payant, a cloth amulet of Tao Wesawan. Tao Wesawan is a very powerful figure in Thai belief, a guardian king known for protection against evil spirits, demons, that kind of thing, a major protector deity. The colleague really hoped this would be the answer.
Another powerful amulet. Did it work this time?
It's quite striking in the source. Mr. Thanet was incredibly grateful for the gesture, but no. The source explicitly states that Tao Wesawan amulet also didn't help. The encounters just kept happening.
So the Long Puthuat didn't stop the plump woman, the Tao Wesawan didn't stop anything either. That's really something.
It really is. It raises questions about why these specific protections weren't effective in this location against these particular entities.
And the activity didn't let up. He mentions when his mother went back to Thailand for a visit, leaving him alone there.
Yeah, he said during that time he'd constantly hear doors and windows opening and closing on their own. And the sound of kids running around the apartment when obviously no children were there. Constant background weirdness.
Okay, so this leads up to what he called the most intense encounter of all. This happened just 3 days before he was due to fly back to Thailand for a merit-making ceremony he'd planned.
Right. He's in bed, curtains open again, and it's sleep paralysis, just like the very first time. But he's fully conscious, fully aware.
And he sees what this time?
Initially, a large dark figure standing on the right side of his bed, and it looked headless.
Headless. Okay, that's terrifying.
You think so, but the source notes something interesting. Mr. Thanet said his initial reaction wasn't overwhelming fear this time. Maybe, as the source speculates, he was just so worn down, so accustomed to the bizarre, that even a headless figure didn't shock him as much initially. His first thought was actually just to mentally promise it, okay, I'll make merit for you when I get back to Thailand. Continuing that hope, you know.
But it didn't stay headless, did it?
No. This is the part that made it the most intense for him. Slowly, unnervingly, the head started to emerge from the figure. It wasn't headless after all. And as the head materialized, he saw it was a Muslim woman wearing a hijab. And she was just staring intensely, directly into his eyes, not breaking contact.
Whoa. The sudden transformation, the specific identity, that intense stare. After seeing a headless figure just moments before, he said seeing that horrifying sight just startled him completely. He instinctively squeezed his eyes shut and just repeated his promise again mentally. I'll make merit for you, I promise. Hoping it would appease her, make her go away.
And when he opened his eyes again,
she was gone.
Just vanished. And that encounter, as terrifying as it was in the moment, seems to have been a turning point.
Yes, exactly. Here's the really significant part. Mr. Thanet says that was it. That was the last encounter he ever had in that condo. After that night, the remaining few nights before he left for Thailand were peaceful. He could actually sleep.
And when he got back to Thailand, he followed through. He went ahead with the merit-making ceremony he'd planned, but he made a point, consciously, to dedicate the merit earned not just to the spirits in his unit, but broadly to all of the spirits throughout the entire condominium building.
Which brings us back to the driver, the one who hinted he knew something about the building's history. The source finally reveals what the driver told him, and it potentially explains, well, everything.
Yeah, the driver laid out the history of the land itself. Before the condo, it was an old cemetery, a kubor, the local term, known for having strong energy. Then later, a slum was built on that same land, an informal settlement.
Okay, cemetery, then slum.
And then tragedy. The slum burned down. A massive fire. Many residents died in the fire right there on the land. Their bodies scattered amongst the graves already there from the old cemetery. Just layers upon layers of death and trauma.
Cemetery, slum, mass death, and a fire. And then a developer came along and built this modern condominium right on top of all that history.
Exactly. And the driver also mentioned, according to the source, that Mr. Thanet wasn't the only one experiencing things. There were other reports in the building, strange things like people vanishing from balconies or hearing balls bouncing on floors where no kids lived. It suggested the whole place might be affected.
Wow. That history, it puts everything into a different perspective, doesn't it? The variety of spirits, the intensity.
It certainly provides a powerful potential context. All that accumulated death, trauma, the disturbance of the land, it could definitely fuel intense and varied spiritual activity. And it perhaps sheds light on why those specific Buddhist amulets weren't effective. He encountered an Indian woman, a Muslim woman, spirits from potentially different backgrounds. The source kind of implies that maybe those specific Buddhist protections just didn't resonate or weren't recognized by those particular entities. It's something seen sometimes in cross-cultural haunting accounts.
It really highlights what an awful position he was in, stuck in this terrifying place because of a lease, on land with such a dark, layered past.
A truly harrowing story. It really makes you think about how places can hold on to the past.
So the final thought for you listening. Considering that history, the sheer intensity of what Mr. Thanet and his mother went through, being financially trapped there, how long do you think you could have lasted? What does a story like this make you think about the history embedded in the places around us, and how the unknown can sometimes intersect so terrifyingly with our lives?
It's definitely a stark reminder from the source material about how deeply connected places can be to their past, especially when marked by tragedy, and how that can manifest for people living there later.
An intense story, for sure. Thanks for joining us as we explored this chilling personal account from the source. We hope it gave you something to think about.
Until next time.